Hello and welcome back to the VolReport Show. I'm Ryan Sylvia, joined by Dale Dowden. We are with VolReport.com on the Rivals Network. And football season is never over in Knoxville. We say it all the time because it's true. But with the actual season over, that means it is recruiting season. In the 2024 class, everyone is signed in Tennessee's verbal commit pool. So now the attention is turned to the 2025 class. So we hopped on to let you guys know who the names are you need to know in this 2025 class as a Tennessee fan. We're going to go position by position, sprinkle in the 5 verbal commits Tennessee already has in the group as we go. First things first, Dale. Everyone wants to hear about this position. They say it makes or breaks your class, the quarterback spot. So who is Tennessee targeting right now with no committed quarterback? And then how does the retirement of Nick Saban and then maybe a signing for LSU impact where Tennessee stands with some of these guys?
Well, definitely, first and foremost, their big target is going to be George McIntyre. Kind of been that front man for quite a while now. Even, back into early in the summer and in the spring, when the emergence of Deuce not hitting the scene, even with him coming on, it was still a bit edged. George was kind of their guy. Following his recruitment, it gets down to where it looks like, Alabama, LSU, and Tennessee are all three very much in the thick of things. And then, as you say, recruiting never stops, and that's the same with everybody, not just Tennessee. So you kind of see some teams kind of remove themselves by default. LSU goes and gets the commitment of Bryce Underwood, who was kind of tabbed as the guy that they wanted, kind of eliminating them down to the Bama Tennessee scenario. And you touched on it, Saban retired, that it does a lot, as you look at Alabama currently, they're starting to have more of their up tier guys, that were either starters or heavily playing. Now they're hitting the portal. So definitely something there, that, and not saying it's a negative thing, just those current players there that's not matching up with what the new coaching staff is bringing in, and it can have an effect on this recruitment with McIntyre. It's a new staff. I'm not sure how thick Washington was in with him on his recruitment. So if they weren't, then it's a completely new face at a familiar program for him. He did announce they have re-offered him. Don't know if he'll have a chance to get on campus. As many reports have come out, and even Austin Price himself at VolQuest was telling a radio station that about the only thing that's keeping McIntyre from making an announcement is the snow days. So take that as you will. It could be a 2-day thing, or 2 weeks, somewhere along those lines. It's almost at any moment now. So you'd have to think Tennessee is in a very, very good position, considering they're the in-state school. They've probably been in it the longest of anybody, and with same coaches for the most part. You have to like their chances. And if they were not to land McIntyre, that's where the question of where do you turn now kind of starts to look. There's a couple of names on that list. One being the younger brother of Nico and Madden tongue twister. Might need to cut that one out, but yeah, Iamali Ava, excuse me. Don't crucify me for butchering that. That's a tongue twister anytime you go to say it. But you'd almost feel like he would be the next guy up. And away from that, it's kind of a Wild West situation. You're not really sure who they would key on to make the centerfold of that quarterback position.
Let's move over to running back then. Tennessee already has a guy in the room in Justin Baker, 4-star out of Buford, Georgia. So first, if you could touch on him. And then Tennessee, they've always liked to get a couple guys in the room. Last year, Cam Sullivan, Khalifa Keith. The year before, Dylan Sampson and Justin Williams-Thomas. So who are some of the other names Tennessee is going to continue to go after in that kind of class as well?
Well, to start with Baker, Baker is an extremely hardworking kid. I've had the pleasure of being around him and his family for a few years now. I'm wanting to say as far back as his 8th grade year. It just phenomenal specimen. He's not the biggest of guys in stature, but he's one of those guys you see him in a workout setting, where he's wearing a sleeveless shirt or no shirt at all. You see that he's very chiseled out for a running back. Kind of what you anticipate seeing out of a Power 5 D1 running back. Does kind of all the things very well. Fairly good in the pass game or the pass blocking. Can catch out of the backfield. Runs hard running the ball. Usually don't see the first guy bring him down, which is a very big plus. Kind of to me, if you're looking at something Tennessee's seen recently, kind of a mix of maybe of a Jalen Wright and a Dylan Sampson. You're looking at his body style and the way that he plays. Um, but a few other guys you've seen Tennessee kind of be active with in the running back position. Alvin Henderson is a name. Jeremiah Seaton, who I'm pretty sure is a relative of Jordan Seaton, the big offensive lineman out of this class that just committed and signed with Colorado. Another kid that would be is kind of a late bloomer that's kind of coming on the scene as of late is a kid out of Baylor High School here in Chattanooga. Mills Knight. Not the first name is escaping me right away, but Mills Knight is the last name. Is a kid that throughout this past season you kind of see him get stronger as the season went on, and when it got into crunch time with some of the big time games, just a guy that kind of refused to go down. Like, there's another guy that pretty much it could be the focal point. Another back that hasn't really had much, I don't want to say much traction. He's had traction with Tennessee, but it's been kind of spotty. Another guy out of the IMG Academy, and I want to say he's actually a Georgia native, and Donovan Johnson. Another one of those shorter stature but compact guys that really tough between the tackles, could really help you out in the pass blocking game. They've got enough weight behind them that if a defensive lineman comes through, they can step in the way and take the blunt force of the impact.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about Justin Baker and we're giving him a mixture of Jalen Wright and Dylan Sampson, I think Tennessee fans are going to be happy if that comes to fruition, because those guys, Jalen Wright obviously about to start his NFL career, and then Dylan Sampson are running back one next year. Two guys that definitely worked out in the orange. We'll move to wide receiver now, a spot that shouldn't be too hard for Tennessee to recruit at given the recent success under Josh Heupel. You talk about Jalen Hyatt winning the Blitnikoff Award. And then now you just signed five-star Mike Matthews, who will begin his true freshman year in this upcoming season. Who are some of the names that Tennessee's going after now to try to keep that trajectory going of being a school that's going to land some big-name wide receivers?
Well, two names initially that jump out, one being an in-state kid in Cameron Sparks, another Baylor kid. Somebody that Tennessee's been on, pretty much from the get-go, great relationship. Don't want to rank Tennessee for him, but I would definitely say Tennessee is at the top end of the schools for him in the big mix. And another receiver, and it's kind of ironic because I'm going to circle back to Cameron because they both share kind of a unique connection. Would be a receiver, I'm pretty sure he's out of Mississippi, is Caleb Cunningham. Now, spoke to Cunningham after the Georgia game, and it was one of those that if you didn't know any better and you're sitting there watching this kid's facial expressions as he's giving you the answers, you'd be like, okay, so you're committed, right? Like, it was just like, and again, I get it. It's right after a visit, emotions are running high from the game, but that also wasn't a game that Tennessee played its best in.
Yeah.
So he was given those positive reviews kind of with a dark cloud overhead, in terms of recruiting. But he spoke very much about a connection with George McIntyre and pretty much how they've kind of been in one another's ear about, the potential of playing together at the next level, kind of checking out a lot of the same schools, made it clear that if, Tennessee was the choice that they decided to do that with, that he was ready to roll. Where that circles back to Cameron Sparks is Cameron Sparks and George McIntyre both play on Tennessee Select, the same 7-on-7 team during the offseason. So, as you mentioned, it shouldn't be a hard position to recruit in with the success of the wide receivers, but not only as much of that, you look at who they have as quarterback. You have Nico at quarterback, you have Merklinger coming, that's already there. If McIntyre comes in right behind that, you could legitimately almost see Tennessee set itself up with wide receivers for the next 3 to 4 classes, knowing that there's going to be a gap between, the quarterback tenures.
And I don't think it should be understated how elite those two guys are either. Caleb Cunningham, number 3 wide receiver in the class. Cameron Sparks, number 8 wide receiver in the class. So 2 top 10 guys at their position. Outside of those guys, who are some of the guys that have maybe slipped through the cracks a little bit in publicity, but you still think Tennessee is going after and could have great careers in college?
A couple of guys. There's a receiver down in Georgia that's always maintained a pretty decent relationship with Tennessee. Always spoke highly of Tennessee. Is Dylan Vickerson. I know a few of the sites have him listed as an athlete. I know with us at Rivals, we have him as a wide receiver. Uh, Physical body, wanting to say he's around maybe the 6'2", 6'3" range. He may be a little bit taller, but just a physical pass catcher. Someone that kind of, again, don't want to compare, but kind of the shorthand guy that can make the catches in traffic, kind of resembling of a Brew McCoy or a Jawan type physicality body across the middle. And 2 more guys, both being from Georgia. Thomas Blackshear, who is a player at Calvary Day, same school that Jake Merklinger come from. So that's an interesting one to watch. I'm pretty sure he's down to 3, if I'm not mistaken, with Tennessee, Georgia, and I want to say Alabama. I want to say it was the 3 that he released. I could be wrong on that. But I do know Tennessee and Georgia was in the mix on that one. And then recently, you spoke on some of the guys we already have committed in the 25 class. 2 DBs that are committed that are teammates in Dylan Lewis and Tyler Redmond. Well, Tennessee just recently offered a receiver from that same school in C.J. Wiley, 6'4", 190. So you got more of your longer, rangy outside threat with that, And again, some of these guys, like you said, they've either slipped through the cracks or just not had the chance to get their notoriety out there. But all guys that are capable of coming in and making an impact if they were to come to Tennessee.
And when we look at the tight end position now, it's another position that Tennessee already has a verbal commit in, but they're still going to try to land another guy or two just because of the lack of bodies that they had going into this offseason. They've landed 2 guys out of the portal, and Jack Van Dorselaer, the 4-star prospect in the 2025 class. But what have you seen out of Jack? And then who is another target that Tennessee has on their mind to maybe pair up with him?
With Jack, again, another physical specimen, just a very big kid. I know that commitment, in a sense, it kind of came out of nowhere, in a sense, to where there wasn't a whole lot of buzz about it leading up to it. Definitely a high-profile kid that was definitely a big win, especially getting him out of Texas. Again, you got the Longhorns coming to the SEC along with Oklahoma. He could have easily went with one of those 2 schools, still made his SEC presence, with one of those 2, but chose to leave his area and come. That's a big win for Tennessee. Big physical guy that can help blocking on the end, very athletic to where you can flank him out, get him one-on-one with a smaller, outside backer or a smaller corner, just kind of let him abuse him in a sense. But another guy that kind of came on a little bit late as of last year, been kind of hard getting a little bit of a feel of him because initially starting, he was kind of shut off to the media, and respectfully so, having a conversation with him, it was understandable. But it's Hollis Davidson. I feel like we're going to go through a list of a lot of guys from the state of Georgia, but it definitely seems like, that they're making that truly a state of emphasis. Another kid, not quite as thick as the Jack, but got that long, rangy body and has the ability to pack on, probably another 20 or 30 pounds between now until he gets to his playing time in college, no matter where that's at. Then again, if they bring him in to pair him in with a guy like Jack, you may not add too much weight on him and kind of have him truly as that pass catching tight end, where you have Jack as more of a pass blocker, which he can also go out there and make plays in the passing game. And as you mentioned, bringing in the 2 transfers out of the portal gives you a little bit more room to breathe with that.
When we move to the offensive line, then feel like we have to start with the number 1 player in the class at any position, David Sanders Jr. Where does Tennessee stand with him right now, just kind of in his recruiting process?
And he was another one that was in town for the Georgia game. Again, spoke very highly of the atmosphere. And again, like you said, number 1 player at his position. I know there was a kind of some mixed reviews coming out of of him, not so much from a talent standpoint, but back during the summer when he was making a lot of his college visits and a lot of college camps, it was kind of a concerning question mark. Is he ever going to kind of grow into his body?
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to say at that time he was floating around like the 250, 260 range. Well, now he's already up in the 270s. So he's already showing that, once he's dedicating himself to getting his body right, adding the weight's not going to be an issue. Another kid, just massive in frame, very long reach. Once he gets his hands on you, can work his hands and his feet up underneath him to get the right leverage. And kind of goes without saying, he's almost one of those guys that, especially for this class, and as long as Tennessee's been with them, you almost you don't want to tab him as a player that you can't miss on, but he's definitely a player that they're not going to want to miss on. If they can get him in the boat, that is, I would about say that as of right now, as much as you alluded to the quarterback position, I would say David Sanders at that offensive tackle position or offensive line position in this particular class, they're probably about neck and neck as far as, a need for what Tennessee's doing moving forward.
Outside of Sanders, who are some other names that you've heard at tackle and at guard that Tennessee's going after?
Oh, man. Josh Petty is a name people, if they're not familiar with, kind of get familiar with. I'll have to go through a list. I just got a list over here. Josh Petty, Juan Gaston is a guy that's been up numerous times on visits, seems to like the direction that Tennessee's going in. And we've talked about this before with previous recruiting classes and certain prospects. A lot of these guys continue to come to Tennessee. And it's one of those deals, when you're early in your process, you kind of want to visit a multitude of schools and get a feel for everybody before you start cutting lists down. You look at some of these guys, it seems like every other weekend they're making a trip to Knoxville. Or if they do go somewhere else, ironically, they're playing Tennessee. So it's like, no matter what, they're getting a chance to see step for step what Tennessee's able to build. A kid, I think a lot of fans would probably have fun following this one. Not saying that Tennessee and this kid are high up in communication, but there has been communication. He has been on visits. Is Braden Jacobs, is an offensive lineman out of Buford. What makes him kind of intriguing for a lot of Vol fans that are a little bit older, y'all may remember his father, Brandon Jacobs, Super Bowl winning running back for the New York Giants. His son is a big-time offensive line prospect out of the state of Georgia, and I about to say built like Brandon Jacobs, but obviously different position build, just still that massive presence. When you see him, you're like, oh my goodness, who is this? And then you see Pops walking next to him, it's like, oh, that makes sense. Another one, mentioning the stuff that's going on with Alabama, it appears that Georgia has jumped in initially to kind of take the front runner lead, but a guy that Tennessee was kind of in on early on was Mason Short, who ended up committing to Alabama at some point last year. I'm going to say not long after the Under Armour camp, because I had just done an interview with him then, and it wasn't long after that he committed to Bama. Well, now his recruitment is back wide open, and Georgia has made a priority where he's done been to Athens for a visit. Kirby's done followed up within less than a week by dropping a helicopter on his baseball field to go see him. So there's quite a bit of offensive linemen out there that would be of interest, but I would definitely say right now that the biggest one circled has to be David Sanders.
And when you go through this list, like we talked about earlier, it's a lot of Georgia guys. Josh Petty from Georgia, Braden Jacobs from Georgia, Juan Gaston Jr. from Georgia. You keep going down the list of targets. Cortez Smith at the guard position, also from Georgia. So Tennessee clearly, I don't know if making it a priority is the right way to say it out of Georgia, but they have boots on the ground in Georgia a lot. And clearly they like a lot of these guys, especially out of Buford. That's a high school that's come up a lot. Let's flip it to the defensive side of the ball now. Starting with the edge rushers, Tennessee, another position that they've had a lot of success kind of building guys up in. We just saw Byron Young put together a really good rookie season with the Rams at the Leo spot. And now James Pierce Jr. picking up right where he left off. Looks like a first-round pick in next year's NFL draft. Who are some of the edge rushers Tennessee has on their list?
Well, I've got a couple of them. The first I'm going to start with just because he's not from Georgia, is Bryce Davis, is a kid from out of North Carolina with again, another solid frame, very athletic. Looking at him, at times you kind of just look at him and think, well, it is a true defensive end. Then you kind of pop on the tape and you see the athletic ability that even if he does line up as a true defensive end, the athletic ability with the spin moves and the swim to get around people and get through and shed blocks. It's like, I'd like to see more of what this kid can do with his hand, up out of the dirt. You
Mhm.
give somebody like that, kind of a not really a head start, but that different stance, and they're coming off with both hands fighting initially. Very intriguing player is another guy that's had a lot of connection and relationship with Tennessee throughout the last year and a half. But going back to Georgia, Keelan Butler,
Mhm.
another. I want to say he's out of Jefferson, if I'm not mistaken. Um, he's been up recently for a visit Tennessee quite a few times. Had a few trips up probably throughout the course of the time when Sammy Brown was taking his visits. A lot of them guys like to travel together to take their visits. Another kid that speaks very highly of Tennessee, loves what they're doing defensively. Talks about it reminding him a lot of what he already does at high school, and it kind of makes him feel like it's a little bit less of a transition. Um, which is always a good thing. You don't want to, even if it's a big time player, sometimes those guys can get overwhelmed too if they think there's a drastic change, coming that they may not be prepared for. Um, another guy, Grayshawn Swain. I haven't heard really much from him as of late, but there again, at one point, kind of very much in the thick of things where he's wanting to come to Knoxville, once, maybe twice every 2 or 3 months, get a really in-depth look. Um, he's definitely a guy I'm gonna have to do a follow-up with, but
Mhm.
definitely a name that I put on my list because, again, watching his tape, you could see what Tennessee and every other program likes about the kid. Athletic ability, size, um, relentless pursuit of the ball. A few of these guys, you kind of you watch their tape and you're like, if these guys were to develop moving forward, you know, James Pierce has given a lot of people a lot of insight of what Tennessee's really looking for at that edge position. That, like you mentioned, that true hybrid guy that you can line him up in various ways, have him come off truly on as a defensive end, or you have him walk up as an extra outside backer, and last minute you drop him out in the flats and he has a pick six. We've seen it play out, and that's why I think a lot of these guys, I think that's what Tennessee is liking about some of these players. They all kind of fit that similar mold.
Moving into the interior, I feel like that's a spot that Tennessee kind of needs to get some bodies in. When you look at the 2024 class, a lot of the defensive linemen they brought in were these edge rushers. And then a lot of the guys on the current roster right now fit more of that edge rushing bill as well. And Tennessee's not afraid to put kind of three of those edge rushers go into the rabbit package on the field,
Mm-hmm.
but to be able to get more depth on the inside and to be able to try to kind of get more bodies there to build up? Who are some of the names in the 2025 class that Tennessee might look to add?
Probably one of their top guys is going to be an in-state kid, and Ethan Utley out of Innsworth. Again, another guy that being in-state has seen Tennessee time and time again, continues to go see the progress. And I think that's a big key for a lot of these in-state guys is and just recruits overall, but especially the guys that can be there, within an hour and a half, 2 hours or so. Nothing that's a drastic travel. Is just seeing as much as you can, just so you can truly gauge the progress of what the program is doing. And Ethan has a very interesting situation. Away from, again, being the motor player of which you're referring to, is he already has two commits for that 2025 class that are in his ear.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of a interesting story. I've gotten pieces of the story. I'm gonna have to try to get all of those guys on a conference call, which would be
Yeah.
Ethan Utley and the two DBs from Milton, and Dylan Lewis and Tyler Redmond, because all three of these guys apparently have been friends for a few years now, to where at one point Utley and Lewis were at the same school and were, so I'm not sure exactly who transferred from where and went to, how all that transpired, but it's very interesting to see that relationships that long ago coming back full circle when some of these guys get ready to make some of their decisions as far as colleges. um, I said Ethan he speaks highly of Tennessee. Really likes what Gardner's been able to accomplish with what he's had. And that's the big thing. Like you mentioned, you hear a lot of the speculation really on the offense and defensive line, really, that at times Tennessee seems to miss on the big name people. Well, if you look at it through that perspective and you see that that's true, then you look over and you see the production, and it's like, okay, well,
Mhm.
if they're missing all these top name guys, and how are they still producing like this? That's when you have to start looking at coaching. And
Yeah.
I think that's really is a selling point for a guy like Ethan Utley, and even on down the list, you have guys like Drevius Hall, Trajan Odom. If I'm not mistaken, I won't say Odom is from North Carolina as well, and may have a connection with the Bryce Davis kid. But that's what has a lot of those guys intrigued, is seeing the coaching style of Gardner, because when you can take what most people who follow recruiting it would say an average prospect, a 3 or a low 4-star, and you're getting the production that Gardner's getting out of some of these guys, that's really eye opening. And Gardner, he's been around the block. He's getting older in age. To where recruiting may not just be his strong suit as far as being on the road trying to recruit guys. But I would about say that that's probably a big part of their selling pitch is if we can have this production with the high 3-star, low 4-star. Some of you guys that are up the ladder a little bit, imagine what we could do with you guys if you're coming in on the more elite side versus what they did when they got here.
I think Rodney Garner's resume does a lot of the recruiting for
Yes.
him at times.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
all the guys he's put in the league. When we look at the linebacker spot, is it fair to say that CJ Jim Coley is kind of a must-hit guy at the linebacker position?
I would have to agree in a sense, just because CJ's a very unique player. You can look at all the sites, Rivals 247 and On3, and you may see 3 different positions listed.
Mm-hmm.
He has the kid's like 6'2", 6'3", at like 200 pounds. So he's kind of got that hybrid frame to where it's like, if you're looking at him as a defensive coordinator, it's like, where are you best suited? Where could you be the most efficient and effective? And you don't want to call him a project player, but it's almost like a scientific project, because
Yeah.
you can plug and play him in so many different areas. You don't have to almost kind of play it by ear and kind of see, you know, where it is that he lands. So from that aspect, I would definitely say that he's a guy that I would probably tab as a must get, because he's so versatile. Even if you don't need him to come in day one at the linebacker position, this is a guy that easily could play early special teams. You get into certain, situations in a game and you need an extra, a linebacker or an extra DB, and with somebody's, you can plug him at safety and play. He's 6'3", 200 pounds. He's almost kind of like that.
Now let's say Jim Corley gets to campus and isn't a linebacker, or maybe he lands somewhere else in his recruitment. Who are some other names at the linebacker position that could kind of fill that role?
Um, for me, looking at the linebacker picture, it's kind of wide open, because again, there's been a few people that's come through. There's not really been a whole lot of, I guess, big name tracks with a lot of linebackers. You have I think it's Mantrez Walker,
Mm-hmm.
another kid that's out of Georgia that Tennessee seems to have kind of picked up on here recently. There's another one. Yeah, Kenyon Rivera is another name. I'm going to again say that he's from Georgia. I feel bad naming off all these Georgia kids, but that's really the guys that seems to have the most traction and dealing with Tennessee right now. And like you said earlier, CJ may not play linebacker. That to me,
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of the dilemma looking at some of these guys. It's like, would they even keep some of these guys at linebackers, or are they recruiting other guys that may be listed as either an athlete or listed as an edge guy that they truly plan on moving to linebacker? Like, so it's right now the linebacking position, or the linebacker position, was probably one of the toughest looking at it, kind of in terms of like where are they looking at the most right now, because there's so many that they're in contact with, and there's really not, away from CJ. I'm not really sure if they've really decided to tab 2 or 3 of them as, hey, these are our guys right now. Like CJ, the versatility and being in state is probably the biggest factors for him that kind of has him setting at the top of that list.
You said you feel bad listening to all these Georgia players. Kenyon Rivera is another Buford guy too, so we're really hammering in on a couple schools here. It feels
I
like.
think a lot of things too is something to kind of ease the mind of fans if you're kind of thinking like, oh, this seems like they're putting all their eggs in the basket with Georgia guys. It seems that way when you look at a lot of the Georgia programs and a lot of these kids that they're recruiting. Milton, 7A state champions.
Mm-hmm.
Buford late in the playoffs. That's a big part of what Tennessee is really doing in terms of trying to change that culture around. When you're trying to build that culture and kind of make it a winning culture, the best way to do that is to start landing some of these guys from high schools that have a winning tradition. Because
Yeah.
those are going to be the guys that when they get to Tennessee, and they're in practice, and they're kind of off, on their own with their teammates, they're not going to tolerate having a teammate talk with a losing mentality. And that's kind of stuff that is kind of invaluable and kind of a lot of the stuff that the most fans don't get to see. But that's a big part of why you see a lot of these, when they're going into Georgia, they're going at the big time programs, getting the winning program kids.
Well, three guys from Georgia that have committed to Tennessee already in the defensive back room: Shamar Arnaud, Dylan Lewis, and Tyler Redmond. Three guys, all defensive backs, all from Georgia. What do you know about them? What do you expect them to do at Tennessee?
Well, ironically, at one point, all three of them were teammates at Milton. Yeah. Since then, Shamar Arnaud has transferred to Carrollton, another winning program. Carrollton is led by Coach Joey King, who was the head coach at Cartersville when Trevor Lawrence was playing for them. They also are home to the new number one quarterback in the 25 class in Julian Lewis after he just reclassified yesterday. I think that's a good fit for Shamar. A coach like Joey, and this is not any shade towards Milton and their coaching staff, but just speaking on Joey King personally, very, very player friendly coach, but still has that almost that Nick Saban mentality to where he gets the best out of his guys. Coach King has always been like one of those coaches for me. Anytime I've been around the program, you kind of, when you're watching them from a distance, you can see that 50-50 combination of the hard-nosed coach, but also that coach in a father figure role. Mm-hmm. So I think that it is going to do well for Shamar as far as his development. Practicing against a guy like Julian Lewis, who's probably going to show him just as many looks his next year of high school than what most kids would ever see in their football career. Again, Shamar is long rangey DB. Don't want to compare him, but small, a little bit thinner in the frame. Probably going to add weight throughout high school and into college. But the one thing that I would say that all three of these guys have in common that's really impressive, and to me something that Tennessee's really not had in a few seasons, is DBs that truly will just line up across from you in man defense, and you're going to have to beat them. And you kind of saw a little bit of it in the bowl game from some of the guys that's already on campus, with your Ricky Gibson and some of your other guys that got playing time that throughout the rest of the season didn't get as much playing time. There was a lot more contested balls from the defense to where, when they're playing man, if that guy breaks, they're jumping it. Like they understand their assignment to where, I'm in man. If you break, I'm not worried about you cutting up field. I'm trusting my safety to be over the top. If you break anything 10 yards or less, I'm on your hip. And you saw a lot more incomplete balls across the middle in that one game than kind of, granted, Iowa's offense, the stats, whatever, the stat line, they struggled this, you still have to give some credit, to those guys for being in position. But to speak on Redmond and Lewis, for anybody that got a chance to tune in and see the Georgia public broadcast of the 7A state title, you kind of saw the same thing. Two guys that are physical, that will line up with you, that they're going to make you beat them. If you're going to catch on them, you're going to have to do it being physical. Redmond, to me, out of the three, is probably right now the most college ready in terms of physicality. Again, another guy that's 6'2", 6'3", about the 200-pound mark. And I've kind of made comments about this before. I wouldn't be shocked to see him get reps at a safety position, just trying to get him on the field as early as possible when he does get there. Uh, Dylan Lewis, kind of more of your traditional corner, about that 5'11 ish, mark. But another guy's going to walk up and he's going to challenge you. Like, you're going to have to truly beat him if he's playing press man. He's going to give you everything he's got. And again, I know sometimes it's hard for us to say that when we're watching games because we don't actually know what the play call itself was. There's disguises. There's walk up to show man, but bail out last minute. I think you're seeing a lot more guys that are there now currently and guys coming in that have that mold and that tendency to. That's what they're able to do. They might have some suits of their game that's stronger than others, but they're not going to shy away from anything.
Now, are there any other guys on the hot board for Tennessee in terms of defensive backs that fans should know the names of?
Yeah, a couple. Two guys are listed specifically as corners that have, again, should be kind of familiar with Tennessee fans is another Georgia guy, John Tay Gilbert, and another kid named Jabori Antone, who, again, they long, rangy DBs can cover ground. They play the ball well in the air. I've had the opportunity to see Gilbert in person. Very physically gifted guy. When he walks on the field, you can clearly tell who he is. Compared to his teammates, he's just he looked like he could play Power 5 ball during his spring game last year. Like, that was a big impressive thing when I saw was just how physically gifted. Then you watch him in the game and just his ability to play the ball in the air, understand down and distance what the offense may try to do to manipulate a secondary to get the favorable matchup to pick up the first down, able to process that very quickly. And it's impressive to see, especially at the high school level. Going down the list, when you look more, kind of at your safety position, a kid I think that probably doesn't get nearly enough of attention that he deserves is Martellus Carter Jr., who initially was down in Rome playing football, transferred up into Chattanooga, played a couple of years at Brainerd, just played this last year at Paducah High in Kentucky. A lot of people probably view him and list him as an athlete because he's a kid that's explosive offensively. But again, when you watch him defensively, he just has the basic instincts of what you would want to see in a college safety. Understands to stay deep, keep everything in front of him, knows when he needs to trust himself in reading the eyes of the quarterback and not take a bait look, and closes very quickly on the ball. And almost like playing chess, he has the ability to bait the quarterback into making some very, ill-advised throws at times, and he's there to make the play on it.
Well, Dale, thank you. That's now the entire position group across the board in the 2025 class. And that was a great rundown. I feel like this will be something that can kind of be looked at back on as well.
And there's a lot of names that, honestly, that I know you and I, we both have a list. There's a lot of names we didn't list just really because there's so many in some of the groups. But Tennessee needs to feel very good where they are right now with the 2025 class, especially with who they already have in the boat, who they're high in on with now. Again, it's anticipated that we could have a commitment announcement from McIntyre at any given moment. And as of now, it seems like all signs are pointing towards Tennessee. Again, we know how that can change. That could change within the next 10 minutes. So, and again, that's a guy, he jumps in the boat. We touched on some of the receivers, but it's a trickle effect, or as I like to call sometimes an avalanche effect. All you need is that one true big name to jump in the boat, and it's unlimitless on who could be next.
Because we've talked about all these guys with connections to George McIntyre, where they take their visit to campus and they kind of bring them up by name almost, where it's like, hey, I'm kind of waiting to see what George does.
Exactly.
You get him in the boat. Yeah, like you said, the avalanche effect could kind of come into form, and all of a sudden 5 commits in the class at this point could turn into double digits and start moving from there. You also mentioned there's a lot of names we didn't get to touch on. If you want an even extended list of names, a more detailed version maybe, of the list position by position, head over to VolReport.com because we'll have content on both the offense and defensive side of the ball. So if you want that full list at your disposal, kind of in writing right there for you, it's at VolReport.com. So make sure you head over there, grab yourself a subscription, and check that out. Dale, thank you again for joining. That was awesome. We appreciate your insight as always. Make sure you go to Twitter and follow Dale at Dale_Dowden. He does a great job, not only just covering Tennessee and the prospects that they have, but during football season, he's at a high school every weekend checking out all these guys. So if you want to be up to date on really just all recruiting across the Southeast, it feels like, make sure you head over there and check out Dale's work. Make sure, once again, though, you head to VolReport.com for that extended list. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, and thank you for watching.